It's difficult to pinpoint the exact moment things started going wrong, but it feels like my life has been unraveling in slow motion. When my ex-partner, Claire, told me she was pregnant, my initial reaction was shock and confusion. We'd been careful, she was on the pill, and I'd even started using condoms for double protection after we had a serious talk about how I didn't want kids. I'd been under the impression that we were on the same page, committed to a life without children. For the last 8 years, it had been our shared vision, or so I thought. When she admitted she'd stopped taking the pill and had tampered with our condoms, my shock turned to anger. The fact that she had gone to these lengths behind my back was a betrayal that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about breaking our trust. It was about manipulating our lives, our futures, all because she believed I might change my mind. And while I understand that people can grow, change their opinions, and desire new things, her deception was not the way to address any change of heart. "I'm keeping it," she said almost defiantly while I tried to process everything. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I was furious and heartbroken, emotions I didn't think could coexist. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew, the woman I planned to marry. All of a sudden, it felt like I was staring at a stranger who had hijacked my life and bent it to her will. I told her I couldn't support this, that I felt completely blindsided. She brushed off my feelings, insisting I was ruining her life by refusing to be involved. But wasn't it my life she was changing without consent? How could she ask me to suddenly become someone I had explicitly said I never wanted to be? To me, it wasn't about fear or a lack of love for her. It was about honesty and autonomy. I'd made it clear from the beginning that I didn't want children, and she'd agreed. And yet, here we were. As the days went on, she became more resolute, sharing the news with friends and family, and expecting me to simply fall in line. I decided to talk to a lawyer, hoping for some way out. Thankfully, as we weren't married, I wouldn't automatically be added to the birth certificate. My lawyer advised me to hold off on waiving any parental rights for now, as it could impact any potential legal battles. The advice was simple: gather proof of her tampering and manipulation, and prepare for the worst. I knew there was evidence. Texts where she admitted to coming off the pill, screenshots of her confession about the tamper condoms. I felt a wave of relief knowing that I had some ground to stand on. But then, just as I was beginning to think I might find a way out of this nightmare, Claire started escalating things. I received a series of letters, forwarded to my parents' home, containing ultrasound photos and pleas for me to step up and be a father. I was exhausted, every reminder of this unwanted situation pulling me down further. When I refused to engage, she threatened legal action, claiming I'd be obligated to pay child support, especially if a DNA test confirmed I was the father. It was like she had weaponized everything in our relationship and was now aiming it straight at me. I refused to submit to the DNA test on the advice of my lawyer. It wasn't long before her parents got involved, trying to pressure me into doing the right thing. My own family was torn. While they sympathized with my plight, they were also from a generation that saw children as blessings. They couldn't understand the depth of betrayal I felt, couldn't see how my ex's manipulation had destroyed any sense of obligation I might have felt toward this child. For them, it was just a family matter that required forgiveness. For me, it was my life and my freedom being held hostage by lies. Things finally reached a breaking point when Claire served me with court papers, demanding a private child support arrangement that was far beyond what the law would require. The sum she wanted was more than I earned, triple what would typically be expected, and her entitlement infuriated me. Here she was trying to extract a life from me I never wanted, forcing me into a corner where I felt like I had no escape. I felt powerless, angry, and utterly alone. As the court date loomed closer, I began to realize just how deeply entrenched I was in this twisted situation. Claire and her family were relentless, treating this child as a certainty and me as a rogue who needed to be whipped into responsibility. Even my own family started echoing their sentiments. My mother, especially, couldn't fathom my resistance. She'd say things like, "Children are a gift, and you'll regret missing out on this." No matter how often I explained Claire's deception, how she'd gone off the pill, how she tampered with the condoms, they just couldn't seem to get it. They'd shake their heads, murmuring that maybe it was just meant to be or a blessing in disguise. Every conversation left me feeling more alienated. They just didn't understand that this was a fundamental betrayal, not some simple dispute over finances or household chores. This was my life being commandeered without my consent. Eventually, my lawyer gave me two options: continue to contest paternity, likely involving a lengthy legal battle, or sign a no-contact agreement. The latter would allow me to relinquish all parental rights, including child support. It was an option I'd been desperately hoping for, but even so, signing it felt like a final bitter end. A concession that, while it meant I'd keep my freedom, also meant severing any chance I'd had to regain the life I'd imagined. By the time the day arrived to sign the agreement, I felt hollow. The past few months had drained every last ounce of energy and hope from me. My parents sat across the table, their faces lined with concern, but I couldn't bring myself to meet their eyes. I knew they thought I was making a mistake. They thought I'd regret it, that I'd wake up one day to realize I'd given up a gift. But they hadn't lived through the lies. They hadn't faced the betrayal. As I scrawled my name across the paper, I felt an odd sense of finality wash over me. Relief and sadness mingled into something bittersweet. I was free, but at a cost. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of peace. I returned home, deleted the last few messages from Claire, and started making plans to leave the city. If I wanted to start fresh, I'd need distance, both emotional and physical. I couldn't bear to stay in a place where every corner held a memory of our relationship, tainted now by deception and loss. It was time to move on, to rebuild myself one broken piece at a time. A few weeks passed in silence. Claire had gone quiet, and so had her family. My parents slowly started to accept my decision, although I could tell they still didn't fully understand. But the space between us gave me room to breathe. I finally started sleeping through the night, finally felt like I could look forward to something again. Then, one day, as I was packing up my apartment, a letter arrived. It was from Claire. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "I know you'll never forgive me," she'd written in a shaky, almost illegible scrawl. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I did to you, for everything I've taken from you. I thought I could make you happy, that this would be the answer to our problems. I see now that I was wrong." I read the letter over and over, waiting for some emotion to hit me, but I felt nothing. Her apology, however sincere, couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the choices she made. In a way, her words were a closure I hadn't expected, a quiet acknowledgement that she knew the gravity of what she'd done. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, and left it there. For the first time in months, I felt ready to walk away, to leave the pieces of a broken life behind me. And as I turned my back on that chapter, I promised myself that, no matter what came next, I would never again let anyone else dictate my future. I packed up my things and moved to a small town far enough away that the shadows of my past wouldn't follow. It was peaceful, a fresh start with new faces and no reminders of the life I'd left behind. I found a job at a local engineering firm, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and slowly, I began to feel like myself again. But life is a way of testing you, even when you think you're finally safe. One evening, as I was unwinding in my new apartment, I got an unexpected call. It was from Claire's mother. I hadn't heard from any of them since the agreement, and seeing her name on my phone was like a punch to the gut. I considered ignoring it, but out of curiosity, or perhaps out of a need to finally face whatever last bit of closure was waiting for me, I answered. Her voice was strained. "I know you don't owe us anything," she began, her tone softer than I'd ever heard it. "But Claire isn't doing well. She's not coping. She says she feels like she's ruined your life, and she's carrying so much guilt. She's a mess, and we don't know how to help her. I don't want her to bring this baby into the world if she's not in the right state of mind." I was silent, torn between empathy and the resolve I'd built over the past months to protect myself. I told her, as gently as I could, that my chapter with Claire was closed. I wasn't the answer to their problems. She sighed a resigned, heavy sound. "I thought you'd say that," she whispered before quietly hanging up. That night, I lay awake, haunted by memories I thought I'd buried. I'd moved away to find peace, but it seemed that peace wasn't as easy to come by as I'd hoped. I was free of the relationship, of the entanglements, of the lie. But somehow, I felt a faint, lingering sorrow for how it had all ended, for the child who would be born into a web of pain and regret. The next day, I booked an appointment with a therapist. In therapy, I finally confronted everything I'd been running from, not just the betrayal or the deception, but the patterns and choices that led me to this moment. The therapist listened patiently as I recounted the story, her silence encouraging me to delve deeper than I'd ever dared on my own. I guess I never fully understood why I felt so trapped. I admitted it wasn't just Claire's lies. Maybe it was the fear of life veering off course. The fear that someone else could change everything I thought was stable. She nodded, offering a gentle, thoughtful look. Sometimes, people come into our lives to reveal parts of ourselves we're too afraid to confront. It sounds like Claire's betrayal opened doors within you that you never intended to open. And she was right. For the first time, I saw Claire's actions as the catalyst for a transformation that had been a long time coming. In those months, I began to understand what it meant to trust myself again, to rebuild from a foundation only I could define. Weeks passed, and with every session, I felt a strange, subtle shift. I'd never envisioned myself as a father, but the idea no longer felt suffocating. Instead, it became a question I could consider without fear. What would it mean to live life on my own terms, even in the face of circumstances I hadn't chosen? Months turned into a year, and my life took on a new rhythm. Friends came and went, new interests flourished, and I started volunteering at a community center, teaching young adults about engineering. My world, which had once felt narrow and defined, began expanding in ways I hadn't thought possible. One day, I got a letter from Claire. I hesitated before opening it, my heart pounding as I read her carefully written words. "Thank you for walking away," she wrote. It forced me to face the reality of my choices, and while I'll never undo the pain I caused, I've learned to take responsibility. I'm trying to become someone I can be proud of, someone my child can be proud of. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm trying. The letter, unexpectedly, was the closure I didn't know I needed. I set it down, took a deep breath, and let go of the last weight I'd been carrying. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of freedom, of true peace. I had lost so much, but I'd gained something far more precious, the power to choose my own path, free from regret and fear. And as I looked around my new life, I realized I had everything I needed to keep moving forward, step by step, on my own terms. As time went on, I embraced the rhythm of my new life. I grew closer to my family, visited friends more often, and started traveling to places I'd only dreamed about before. Each trip became an opportunity to rediscover myself, far away from the life I'd once known. One autumn, I found myself on a solo hiking trip through the Scottish Highlands, a place I'd long wanted to explore. The crisp air, towering mountains, and solitude felt like a balm, cleansing me of any lingering doubts or regrets. It was there, standing on a mist-covered cliff, that I realized just how far I'd come. I'd taken control of my story, not defined by past pain or by others' choices, but by the new life I was building. Back home, I kept teaching and mentoring. The kids I worked with grew to trust me, and in turn, I found myself genuinely invested in their futures. Watching them succeed became a source of pride, each of their achievements like a small victory of my own. One day, a former student approached me after class. "Thanks for sticking around," he said, nervously scratching his neck. "You make things better here, you know?" Like for all of us, I smiled, more deeply moved than I'd expected. It was a simple acknowledgement, but it held meaning, proof that I had found purpose beyond the wreckage of what once was. Claire eventually reached out once more, this time with a photo of her child. "Just thought you'd like to see her," she wrote. No expectations, just life. I looked at the photo of the little girl, who had Claire's eyes and a smile that reminded me of both the past and the future. I kept that photo in a drawer, a quiet reminder that life moves on. It wasn't painful anymore, just a part of my story. I was finally free, with nothing to weigh me down, nothing to hold me back. And for the first time, I felt fully alive, ready for whatever lay ahead. The journey was mine to continue, shaped only by my choices and dreams. And with each step forward, I knew I'd made peace with the past, leaving behind the shadows to walk boldly into my future. Continuation. After the last update, things took a darker turn for OOP. The stress of the situation kept building, and despite the support from his lawyer, he felt the walls closing in. His parents continued pushing him to find the positive in the situation, which only increased his resentment. He could barely face his own family, knowing they sympathized with his ex-partner's side of things, even after she admitted to tampering with their protection. October 18th, 2 days after his last post, OOP received another letter from his ex-partner's family attorney. This time, the letter was more intense, urging him to meet a mediator to discuss child welfare and financial support. The letter mentioned that they would pursue every legal avenue to establish his responsibility as a father unless he agreed to provide monthly financial support. Feeling cornered, OOP reached out to his lawyer, who assured him that the laws were on his side. "You don't have to cave in," the lawyer said, "and without a legally confirmed DNA test, they have little grounds. Just stay the course, and let me handle any further communication." That evening, OOP's ex-partner left a voicemail filled with tearful pleas, insisting that she wanted him involved for the sake of the child. The message left OOP feeling numb, as he struggled to reconcile the person he had once loved with the deceitful actions she had taken. The past 8 years felt like a blur of empty promises. He wasn't just angry, he was devastated. October 20th, on the advice of his lawyer, OOP decided to limit all communication with his ex. He was advised to avoid verbal conversations and to redirect all inquiries through the legal team. OOP agreed, feeling a measure of control return. Over the next few days, he began the process of disconnecting emotionally. He focused on starting a new freelance consulting business from home, hoping it would provide him the financial flexibility he needed to survive. It was daunting, but with his industry experience, OOP felt a glimmer of hope that he could regain independence. October 24th, a knock on the door interrupted his morning routine. He opened it to find his ex's parents, holding a stack of documents and a somber expression. They'd driven all the way from out of town to speak with him. After a few tense moments of silence, they finally broke the ice. "Look, we understand this was a difficult decision for both of you, but running from this responsibility is unfair to the child," his ex's mother stated. OOP's mind raced as he considered the weight of their accusations. Fighting back frustration, he replied, "With all due respect, your daughter made a unilateral decision that forced this situation on both of us. I didn't ask for this. I won't be forced into a commitment built on lies." They argued for nearly half an hour, but nothing swayed OOP. When they realized their efforts were futile, they left, warning him that they would pursue other means to ensure he would pay for his actions. November 10th, after weeks of silence, OOP's lawyer informed him that his ex's parents were attempting to establish grounds for a paternity suit. This brought the specter of a court-ordered DNA test into sharp focus. Knowing this might be inevitable, OOP prepared himself mentally and emotionally, but his lawyer reassured him that he still held strong grounds to fight. At the same time, he found out through mutual friends that his ex had started speaking publicly about her situation, painting herself as a single mother abandoned by an irresponsible father. The narrative was twisted, leaving OOP feeling betrayed by people he once trusted. November 18th, unexpected encounter. One evening, he ran into an old friend, Sarah, at a coffee shop. They hadn't spoken in years, and she was shocked to see the stress lines on his face. OOP reluctantly shared some of his ordeal, surprised by the depth of her empathy. Sarah listened intently, sharing her own struggles and offering an unexpected source of comfort. For the first time in months, he felt heard. They began meeting regularly, and soon Sarah became his confidant, offering a much-needed reminder that he wasn't alone. December 15th. The holiday season was upon him, but it was marred by the legal battles and emotional strain. Just as he was preparing to take a mental break, his lawyer called with news. His ex had formally requested the court-ordered DNA test. Despite his resistance, OOP knew this was the turning point he couldn't avoid. The results would bind him legally and financially to a child he never wanted. That night, he confided in Sarah, who encouraged him to keep fighting, but also to consider if there was any room in his life for this child. "I don't see myself as a father," he replied quietly, "but I also don't see myself running away from responsibility if I have to. I just wish things had been different." January 12th, court date. The day of the court hearing arrived. OOP was filled with a mix of dread and defiance as he walked into the room, the silence between him and his ex heavy with tension. She appeared tired but resolute, her gaze darting nervously between him and the judge. The judge, after listening to both sides, ordered the DNA test. "Once the results are conclusive," he said, "we'll discuss any further financial responsibilities." OOP's lawyer reassured him that the fight wasn't over, but this marked a significant shift. February 5th, the results. When the DNA results came back, OOP was confirmed as the biological father. The truth felt like a heavy weight, but he resolved not to let it break him. Though his involvement was still his choice, he knew the financial implications would be unavoidable. Shortly afterward, his lawyer informed him of an option to negotiate a one-time settlement that would absolve him of future involvement. The idea brought him some relief, but also guilt. While he still felt deceived, the concept of abandoning the child left a bitter taste. February 12th, Sarah's advice. Over coffee, Sarah gently challenged him. "Maybe you don't have to be the father she wants you to be. You can set boundaries and be the person you're comfortable being. But don't let her choices dictate who you become." Her words resonated, and over the next few days, he contemplated what he could offer without compromising his values. February 20th, a decision. OOP decided to propose a compromise. He offered financial support through a private agreement, but on the condition that he would have limited involvement. He wasn't ready to be a father, but he didn't want to leave entirely. His ex accepted, albeit reluctantly, understanding that her deception had fractured any hope of a family unit. March 3rd, moving on. With a private agreement in place, OOP started to rebuild. He expanded his consulting business and focused on personal growth, hoping to find peace in his new reality. Sarah remained in his life, a steadfast friend and a reminder that trust could be rebuilt. Over time, he found himself softening, even considering the possibility of meeting his child one day. But for now, he was content knowing he had regained control of his life. The experience left him scarred but wiser, with a renewed sense of resilience.